As the race for the Republican nomination heats up, there is one candidate who has been largely ignored by the mainstream media. Shame on us. He deserves more attention from us than he's getting. Ron Paul makes a lot of sense, and more people ought to listen to him. The Texas congressman has visionary ideas about where the country ought to be going and what sea changes are necessary in order for the U.S. to continue being a superpower. When Ron Paul ran for the Republican nomination in 2008, he talked about the economy imploding, the untenable nature of the national debt, the eventual destruction of our currency, and a limited role for government. He showed tremendous fundraising ability and had an absolutely rabid base of support. Problem was, it was too small. In the 4 years since then, a lot of the things Ron Paul warned us about have happened. We're deeper in debt, a lot deeper. The dollar is worth quite a bit less. The federal government increasingly dysfunctional, and the country is more divided maybe than at any time since the Civil War. Yes, Ron Paul is a conservative, but he's not one of those who goes around hitting people over the head with his Bible. And looking at the current batch of Republican wannabes, especially in light of some of the stuff that's come out of Michelle Bachmann and Rick Perry's mouth in the last 24 hours, Ron Paul stands out as maybe the only adult in the room. In politics, just like in life, it's often the timing that makes the difference. In the case of Ron Paul, it seems events over the last 4 years have finally caught up with the candidate. Paul's message hasn't changed, but the urgency of what he's saying has increased dramatically. And it seems like this time, more people may be listening. He came within an eyelash of finishing first in the Iowa straw poll, less than 200 votes behind Michelle Bachmann out of nearly 17,000 votes cast. Again, a fact that was largely overlooked by the mainstream media. Michelle Bachmann has no chance of being the next president of the United States. Maybe Ron Paul should be. Here's the question. Is Ron Paul the only grown-up running for president on the Republican side? Go to CNN.com/Cafferty File and post a comment on my blog, or go to our post on the Situation Room's Facebook page. Question this hour, is Ron Paul the only grown-up running for president on the Republican side? Jarrett writes, yes. The real question is, are Americans ready to put on their big boy pants and accept some of the truths Ron Paul has been telling us for decades? We're broke. Our wars are a racket. The Fed is destroying our currency. The Congress is ripping us off. The threat of terrorism has been exaggerated. We're never going to agree on everything, so let's focus on agreeing on one thing, that we should all be free. Andy writes, the only grown-up, I don't know. What I do know is he gets little or no media coverage even after he practically tied Michelle Bachmann in the Ames straw poll, and that's her home turf. Jeff writes, an adult would not advocate some of the insane policies that Ron Paul does, though he is deserving of respect for the consistency of his views. Tony writes, not only is Dr. Paul the only grown-up in the race, he's the only candidate who is mature enough to tell us the truth, even if it's unpleasant. After listening to him, I'm reminded that there are still good leaders out there who actually want us to be free and live in peace. Refreshing to hear an honest, unscripted, heartfelt candidate who speaks passionately and truthfully about the issues that matter to us all. Tommy writes from North Carolina on Facebook, Ron Paul is not the only adult in the Republican race, just the only honest one. And Tony in Topeka writes, he might not be the only adult, but I can't think of another. By the way, Jack, I think the real question should be, why is the media not covering Congressman Paul? Jon Stewart did an amazing piece on his Daily Show last night. Sometimes I wonder whose side the media is on. If you want to read more about this, you find it on my blog, CNN.com/Cafferty File, or through our post on the Situation Room's Facebook page.
Earlier this hour, we debated whether presidential candidate Ron Paul is getting enough attention. He basically tied with Michelle Bachmann in this weekend's straw poll, but she got all the news coverage, not to mention his Texas colleague Rick Perry stealing all the headlines. So we asked on JerryWillis.com, is Ron Paul being ignored by the media? 97% of you said yes, he is. 3% said no. And listen to this. We had voters from 26 different countries voting in that poll. Be sure to log on to JerryWillis.com for our online question every weekday.
So now with Pawlenty dropping out, Rick Perry dropping in, and Michelle Bachmann and Ron Paul dominating the Ames straw poll, we got ourselves a race.
We have a top tier. It is Mitt Romney, Rick Perry, and Michelle Bachmann.
We have a new top tier, and it's Perry, Mitt Romney, and Bachmann.
There's now a top tier in this race, at least for now, of Romney, Perry, and Bachmann.
I mean, I think that's fair to say. Really? Fair to say? You're not forgetting, I don't know, anyone, say an ideologically consistent 12-term congressman who came within less than 200 votes of winning the straw poll? Isn't anyone going to give that gentleman a little love?
There's a top tier now of Bachmann and Perry and Romney, and, you know, we haven't mentioned, and we should.
Thank you.
We haven't mentioned, and we should, Rick Santorum, who did really surprisingly well for the amount of money and resources he had.
Rick Santorum? He didn't get half of what Ron Paul got. He lost to the guy who lost so bad he dropped out of the race. Santorum?
We're looking at Mitt Romney, who continues to be the front runner, but we have Rick Perry as well, and now Michelle Bachmann. Let's not count out Jon Huntsman, though.
What? Jon Huntsman? Huntsman got 69 votes. If all of Jon Huntsman's supporters met at the same Ames, Iowa Quiznos, the fire marshal would say, yeah, that's fine, no problem. There's still some tables open in the back. Huntsman was the only Mormon running in the straw poll, and he came in second amongst Mormons. And by the way, this pretending Ron Paul doesn't exist for some reason has been going on for weeks.
A new Gallup survey showing Rick Perry running second to Mitt Romney, knocking down Iowa favorite Michelle Bachmann to fourth.
Behind who? Fourth behind who? How did Libertarian Ron Paul become the 13th floor in a hotel? Why? What's wrong with... He is Tea Party patient zero. All that small government grassroots business, he planted that grass. These other folks, they're just moral majorities in a tri-cornered hat. Ron Paul's the real deal, and Fox News should love this guy. But watch the disconnect between the debate moderators at Fox's Thursday debate and the debate audience.
Iran does not have an air force that can come here, just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they had nuclear weapons, and we had to go in. I'm sure you supported that war as well. Yeah. Okay. It's time we quit this. It's time. It's trillions of dollars we're spending on these wars.
What's with the smirk and the eye roll? The guy gives it, the crowd goes nuts, and you do one of these. There goes crazy Uncle Ron, babbling about the unsustainability of multiple wars. Boop, boop. He's the one guy in the field, agree with him or don't agree with him, who doesn't go out of his way to regurgitate talking points or change what he believes to fit the audience he's in front of. And you're treating him like if this were Celebrity Apprentice, he'd be this guy. By the way, at the Ames, Iowa straw poll, Busey beat Huntsman 77-69. And even when the media does remember Ron Paul, it's only to reassure themselves how there's no need to remember Ron Paul.
Right now, live, right next to the bus behind us, Ron Paul is speaking. And 7 of the candidates are here today. We have live pictures of Ron Paul, but you know what? We're talking about Sarah Palin and we're talking about Rick Perry, the two people not in the race yet, Drew.
And guess what, Paul? If you get video of Sarah Palin or get a soundbite from her, bring that back to us. You can hold the Ron Paul stuff.
It's the story of a lost city, lost opportunity, lost hope. A story of failed policies, failed leadership. A story of smooth-talking politicians, games of he said, she said, rhetoric and division. One man has stood apart, stood strong and true. Voting against every tax increase, every unbalanced budget, every time. Standing up to the Washington machine, guided by principle. Ron Paul, the one who will stop the spending, save the dollar, create jobs, bring peace. The one who will restore liberty. Ron Paul, the one who can beat Obama and restore America now.
I'm Ron Paul, and I approve this message.